Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Good. It's the middle of the summer. This is supposed to be the slow time of year, and we have a ton of exciting, interesting news to talk about. This is a really wonderful surprise.
Yeah, for a while, people were like, what's wrong with Ryan Day's recruiting? What's going on? Are they, losing Paris Johnson perhaps? And now, like last week's show, I think was almost entirely recruiting. This week's show won't be entirely recruiting, but it could be because there were three more commits this week, beginning with Ben Christman, the 2021 offensive lineman out of Northeast Ohio, number 2 player in the state, number 44 player in the composite. But like I told you, Tom, last week, Rivals has him pretty low, which is going to hurt his ranking in the composite. And Tom, I was right, because at 44, 24/7 has him at like their 25th or 26th, 27th player, which is usually 5-star range. But the Buckeyes may have to settle for just a top 50 commit, which, for this 2021 class, that might be kind of shaky. That might be kind of slumming it a little bit. Although he is currently their number 2 rated, their second highest commit in the 2021 class, which now features Jack Sawyer, 5-star defensive end from Ohio, number 2 player in the nation, Christman, Kyle McCord, the number 5 quarterback, pro-style quarterback in the nation, number 51 player overall, the number 2 pocket passer, according to Rivals, I believe, and then Jaden Ballard, the Massillon wide receiver that we talked quite a bit about last week, and maybe even, not the week before, because we were off for like 3 weeks. But so that's 4 guys committed in 2021 right now, all top 110. McCord is the number 51 player in the composite. But when you look at the Ohio guys, Ohio State now has 3 of the top 5 Ohio guys in 2021 committed. Ballard is number 5. Lorenzo Styles Jr. is number 3. Najee Story, we talked a little bit about him last week, number 4. The Buckeyes are favored on those guys. Now, Corey Kiner, the number 6 guy, running back out of Roger Bacon, has visited Ohio State recently, but is something leaning towards Michigan. And that will be interesting to watch to see if, because we've seen it before, Tom, when somebody is leaning towards Michigan and Ohio State comes in and starts paying attention more to the in-state kid, and the wardrobe kind of changes a little bit. But there are two running backs in the state that Jalen Anderson out of Perry is the other one, who's a 4-star guy, but really the offers are odd. And then you've got Reed Carrico, the linebacker out of Ironton, AJ Kirk, the safety out of Dublin Kaufman, who also have Ohio State offers. Another guy that I'm interested to see what happens with, Tom, and I don't know how much you've watched of him, and I don't know exactly how to say his name, but I'll say Marquell Parks out of Orrville. When Ohio State talks about looking for their Rondale Moore, and they may, maybe they'll get that in Mookie Cooper if, that's what they're thinking. But this dude from Orrville is 5'7", like 150. I think he scored almost 40 touchdowns last year. When you talk about these slippery slot guys, he's one to watch. Tom, do you think Ohio State would ever sign a 5'7" guy who's 150 pounds, whose name isn't Chick Harley?
I would think that, well, first of all, he was a sophomore last year, so there's a decent chance he'll grow or at least put on a little weight.
I've talked to his doctors. The growth plates are in.
He may be able to eat a couple extra sandwiches and get a little north of $150. That's a possibility. There's a better chance after watching Rondale Moore last year. There's a better chance that you get an offer to someone like that. And if he gets, he's listed at 5'7", 150, and as a sophomore, you might get an extra inch or two of height, and you might be able to put on 15, 20 pounds, something like that. That's not that far from where DeMario McCall probably was at that point in his career. So if you are 5'7", 150, and you're only a sophomore, and you're already being rated as one of the top 10 players in the state in your class, that probably is a pretty good indication that you're doing some stuff on the field that makes you stand out. So he will either be someone that Ohio State offers or someone that goes to Indiana, scores 2 70-yard touchdowns against Ohio State, and Ohio State fans absolutely scream bloody murder that they didn't offer him.
Those will be good times. But, he's from Orrville, which I think is kind of country. And, 5'7", he's got to be, I'm sure he's pretty strong because that's how we are, those of us from smaller areas. Tom, you're from the big city, so you're soft. Those of us from smaller areas I've had to overcome a lack of streetlights and transportation. All right. And so, we'll see how he goes. But just a really, really good class in 2021 out of Ohio, and the Buckeyes should get the bulk of what they want and who they want. They also landed this week linebacker Cody Simon, who we've been talking a little bit about in preparation for this because this was looking like it was going to happen. New Jersey linebacker, the number 10 outside linebacker in the nation, number 153 overall, number 4 player in the state. 6'1", 218. This trend of, I shouldn't even call it a trend. Guys just, they grow. He's a smaller linebacker who will put on weight and end up, probably start at the will. And I know there's been some talk about him moving to middle linebacker, and that's fine. And we'll see if that happens. We also had that talk about Chris Worley and how you need, we'll see how that happens. And it didn't go well, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Cody Simon's a fast guy. I think a 4.62 this spring or this winter. When I see people talking about how, he's small or he's this or he's that, he's not much different than Darren Lee, not that much different than Ryan Shazier in terms of these high school guys that you bring in and you develop. And when you have these spread offenses, Tom, in college football, this is the way, this is one of the ways to combat these offenses is with these fast linebackers that you put some weight on.
Right. This goes right along with a conversation we had last week, which was the general trend is you're recruiting safeties and moving them to linebacker, you're recruiting linebackers and moving them to defensive end, or you're recruiting Sam Hubbard as a safety and moving him to defensive end. Like you're trying to get quicker and quicker, be able to go sideline to sideline at every position, basically. This fits right in with that because you don't need that big 245-pound thumping linebacker anymore because you're not facing teams lining up in the I formation. You're facing teams spreading you out. I mean, this is one of the signs of the apocalypse, but Michigan is going speed in space now, and that is basically 180 degrees from what they've done at any point in the last 50 years outside of the Rich Rodriguez era. So this is, for Jim Harbaugh to be taking his team to the speed in space model, that's a pretty good indication that outside of, I don't know, maybe Wisconsin or Iowa, there's not that many teams that are kind of going the other direction right now. So that does make sense to get smaller, take the linebacker off the field, replace him with the bullet in certain situations, so you get that faster safety type player out there replacing a linebacker because they're going to go small, they're going to spread you out, and you need to be able to run, and that this commitment I think fits right in with that general trend.
How much do you see this being sort of a correction or overcorrection? Not overcorrection, but to the lack of having that last year with Tough Borland, Pete Warner being exposed a little bit. This to me feels like, let's try to eliminate that as much as possible down the line. And when you get guys that can rip off a 4.6, that's going to help. And we'll see if they can land Court Williams here in the next, what is it? It's coming up where he will be committing somewhere. And I know that we've talked about him as a possible linebacker bullet, and he's similar to Cody Simon, almost identical size, speed. And I'll be interested to see if that continues next year in the 2021 class, as well as if is this where they're going? But then, Tom, we also have to talk about Mitchell Melton, who's like 6'3", 230, 6'4", 225, depending on, which site you want to believe, who is a bigger linebacker, not the fastest guy, but to me, he probably ends up as a rush end hybrid like Josh Uche at Michigan, where he's sometimes he's a linebacker, sometimes he's a rush end. We saw that a couple of years ago. They called it a jack linebacker with Sam Hubbard. But these bigger linebackers may be becoming more pass rushers, and then you'll just have the smaller, quote unquote, smaller guys, just the 6'1", 230 guys, the fast guys running around defending guys.
Yeah, I mean, there's a role for both of them, and you are going to play teams where you're going to want a bigger body on the field at sometimes, but if you can use that kind of hybrid, like you said, that sort of Sam Hubbard type model, that's a good way to give yourself some positional flexibility. That's something we've talked about with Sean Wade in the past, where he can fit and do a couple different things and fit in a couple different spots on that defense. Having that ability lets you adjust a little bit more to what the offense is doing. And, if they line up in a certain way and you want that sort of faster edge rusher, great. And if he's also that linebacker kind of speed guy that you can kind of do a couple different things with, that kind of flexibility, that gives you a little bit more leeway in adjusting to what the offense is going to try and do.
Another versatile defender that committed this past in the last week was Cincinnati defensive tackle, defensive end, depending on how he shows up, Darian Henry, the number 121 player in the nation, number 11 defensive tackle according to the composite, number 2 player in the state. I think rivals might still have him around number 45 overall, and like the number 4 or 5 strong side defensive end. I guess last year, he's recently been dealing with a shoulder injury, so that may be the cause of some of his rankings drop. But obviously a key component to this recruiting class, not just because they need defensive guys, which they did, and everything starts up front, and he's a guy that can play inside or outside. We'll see where that is. But he's also, and we've probably talked about him on the last 12 shows at one point or another, he's one of the best in the state, very close friends with Paris Johnson, so that the Paris Johnson situation seems to have solidified, and I don't think there's much concern there anymore. But again, this is Ryan Day coming in and landing the 2 best, if assuming they sign, the 2 best players in the state. And just looking at the rest of the state, like, it's not as loaded as next year's, and it's a situation where Ohio State is letting a lot of the guys go, and they had their eyes. They want to sign as many Ohio kids as possible, but they're not going to necessarily, the skill positions, they're not going to reach on when they're able to go and get the best or some of the best in the nation. So Darian Henry, the number 2 player in the state. Tom, just a position that we know Larry Johnson loves to have as many, he wants his linemen to have as many tools in their toolbox. He wants to have as many carpenters, as many contractors as he can in his defensive line room. And Darian Henry is the guy that gives Larry Johnson options. However he sees him growing, he can steer him and build him in that direction. And then also, you're going to have a guy who can do multiple things because he's versatile.
Well, we just talked about this with Mitchell Melton, but Darian Henry, when you watch his film in high school, he will line up inside, he will rush off the edge, and he will rush standing up. Like those are all things, tools in his toolbox, as you just said. And he's listed at 6'4.5", 279. He is probably not going to be a stand-up rusher at the college level, but if you can slide him outside occasionally and also have him slide inside, and he can be, if he's quick enough to rush as a stand-up rusher right now in high school, he's probably quick enough to be one of the inside guys in the rushman package at some point, if he can keep that quickness. So that, maybe he's the Tyreek Smith inside guy on the Rushman package in the 2021 season, say. He's someone who probably, I would guess he probably fits in as a 3-tech defensive tackle, but when all is said and done, that would be my best guess on it. Because he's bigger he's like 30 pounds heavier than Ty Hamilton, who's the other defensive lineman they brought in June. So that certainly would suggest to me he ends up inside. But if he's able to rush off the edge right now, and he's able to rush standing up right now, if they need to slide him outside, they can slide him outside. I mean, I comped him last week to Jayshon Cornell, just in terms of he could be a defensive end, but he's kind of on the big side for a defensive end. And Jayshon Cornell's kind of gotten caught a little bit as a tweener. Like, he's not quite big enough to be a tackle, but he's kind of big on the big side for defensive ends. Henry will probably have to end up on one end of that scale or the other, but that's kind of where he maybe comes in, if you want to think of him in terms of a current Ohio State player.
I will go with a former Buckeye, also a Cincinnati guy, Adolphus Washington. Came in as a defensive end, played quite a bit as a defensive end, but then, Joey Bosa came in and everybody realized that Adolphus Washington realized himself that it was time to play defensive tackle. And I could see it going similar to that. But, it all depends on what they do once they get here. Does he slim down? Does he bulk up? Is he right now is he heavier than he plays right now? And who knows, in October, is he 260? And now we're talking about somebody completely different. So those are the 3 commits. Could have 2 more this week. We talked about Mitchell Melton, 3-star guy, choosing between Ohio State and Michigan State on July 3rd. And then Josh Fryer, I think the number 8 center in the nation, 3-star offensive lineman out of Indiana, tweeted yesterday that he has the big announcement on July 4th. And Tom, if you're going to have a big announcement on July 4th when people are trying not to work, it better be a commitment. It better not be, hey, I'm going to the Under Armour game, or hey, here's my top 9, or hey, just wanted to let everybody know, go America. It better be a commitment deal.
This reminds me of the time that Jim Tressel selfishly ruined your Memorial Day. I mean, one of the most selfish acts I can remember. I think it's probably safe to say that at least Ohio State will have at least one more player on their officially committed list by the end of this week, and it could be more than one. You and I talked offline last night about the fact that we have. It seems like we've just been writing commitment pieces for the last month, and somehow we haven't actually written all the commitment pieces yet because there's so many guys who are kind of in the pipeline and potentially coming in the at least at some point in July. There's just so much action on the recruiting front right now, and that's a real testament to what this Ohio State staff has done this year, and that's why you keep things in-house with a Ryan Day. Like, when they kept the existing staff in place, they turned the reins over to Ryan Day. This is exactly what they were hoping it would look like. Like, this is why you do that. If you're going to trust a guy who has been an interim coach for 3 games ever and turn over the reins of your program, it's because you're hoping that the machine just keeps firing on all cylinders as it has been, and it just keeps running smoothly the way it has been. And that is exactly what's happening. The recruiting this year, considering that how much of an unknown Ryan Day is in a lot of ways, it is remarkable. And it's a testament to Ryan Day, but it's really a testament to Mark Pantoni and his staff and how strong their operation is and what a well-oiled machine that recruiting operation is. And also how strong the Ohio State brand is with teenagers right now and college football recruits. This is a program that has been dominant as long as any of these kids can remember. And for them to kind of just be willing to accept, well, yes, this legendary coach who's maybe one of the top 10 coaches of all time ever in the sport has left, but it'll be fine. Like it should. I don't see any reason to expect anything to change. Like that's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, they've got the number 4 class in the nation right now, 15 commits. There's talk that maybe kicker Jake Siebert would be a gray shirt. which if that's the case, now the class may be it is a little over half full, or, right there. So this is going to be a big class because they've got so many guys committed early. And so there's still a long way to go, and a lot of guys out there. And there's more recruiting going on this weekend, or not this weekend, but this past weekend and this week going on at the opening, the weekend before at the Rivals 5-Star Challenge, where Ohio State commits are there, and they're talking to the uncommitted guys or guys who are committed to other schools. Like Legend Cavazos right now is attached to the hip with Elias Ricks, the 5-star cornerback who's committed to LSU. And, it's like the dead period or something. And so quiet period, dead period, I don't know, where coaches don't have as much communication and there's no face-to-faces, but their minions are still working there. The Ohio State commits all have their lists of players, and they're talking, they're putting everything in the other guys, in the recruits' ears. They go in with just a game plan of who to talk to, this is your target. We want this guy, this guy, this guy. And so they go in there and they work. Jack Miller working, Legend Cavazos working, all of these guys. And a lot of times it's those guys seal the deal. I know coaches get a lot of credit, but players need to get some credit too, and not just the recruits, but also the current players. And I know we've talked to some guys who, like current Buckeyes, who will tell you that they're good hosts, or they have this record with commits, and they've only lost a couple of visits to where guys will, when they're hosting, and they're always successful hosts. And it takes the village, Tom, to bring in a top 5 class. And when it's all working and you lose Urban Meyer and it's a blip, but if you can just keep it at a blip, you can't ask for anything more. And I think that's even more than you can expect.
Well, it's a testament, I think, to some degree to the kind of kids they recruit. I mean, Ohio State has made a real concerted push to look for kids with a good, solid family background and a good, solid educational background, and really good, solid citizens. And those are the kind of players where if you have all of those aspects, and also you're one of the top players in the country, that's the kind of person that people want to be around. I mean, that's the kind of person that can kind of draw you in. You have a lot of big kind of, I don't know, friendly, outgoing, gregarious, whatever term you want to use, personalities on that Ohio State team. And I think you see that with some of the recruits as well. And often the lead recruiter in a class is the quarterback. And Ohio State has a top 100 quarterback, number 2 pro-style quarterback in the nation, Jack Miller, for 2020, already locked in. He's been committed for a year already. They've got Kyle McCord, he's a top 10 national player. I think he's 9th in the country, 8th in the country of any player, regardless of position, according to Rivals for 2021. If you've got those guys in, those guys are going to be at all the All-Star games. They're kind of de facto leaders in their class already. They're already in with a year and a half to go before they're, they both are committed basically a year and a half before they're going to actually sign on the dotted line on National Signing Day. So those guys can kind of be real ringleaders for you in helping to bring in that talent. But I mean, yeah, like you said, Legend Cavazos, I mean, he seems in our limited interactions with him, he seems like a very impressive and fun kid. I could definitely see how he's someone who would make a lot of friends on the All-Star circuit and be the kind of guy that people would want to come play with. And you get enough of those guys, and this is like the Amway model. I recruit 1 4-star player or 5-star player, and then they recruit 2 5-star players, and pretty soon you've got one heck of a class. And just to give you a sense of the numbers right now, Michigan and Penn State combined have 36 players committed for the 2020 class, 36 between the two of them. 3 of them are top 100 players, and one of those guys is number 100 in the nation, and that's a Penn State guy. And I think the other 2 Michigan players, none of them, number 80 is the highest ranked player for for those two teams combined. Ohio State has 7 top 100 players, and the 7 highest rated players between Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, the 7 highest rated players of the 2020 class all going to Ohio State. And that's with Michigan and Penn State having their classes largely full right now. So that's a pretty good indication that this, however much this thing was rolling under Urban Meyer, I think we all were expecting, hey, you got to expect a step back. And maybe there's been a little tiny step back, but it is not. They might have rocked back on their heels ever so slightly, but it was not much of a step back. They have got this thing rolling right now, and if they can keep it up and they can put together a pretty good fall season this fall and keep it rolling, then that would be a real encouraging sign for Ohio State fans into the foreseeable future.
Yeah, you don't know what like a 9-3 or 8-4 season, how that would impact that. Would it make them? Would they see an opportunity right away to come in, or would they see a program that's like, well, this isn't the Ohio State that I was thinking of, but 8-4, 9-3, I don't think it's possible. I believe Tom said 7-5, but I don't want to put your name to that, Tom. So let's just strike that one from the record. But I believe you did say it. But let's just move on.
Would you like to do listener questions?
Yes, let's go to listener questions as I crack myself up.
All right. First one from @ChipMinnick. You mentioned in a previous podcast that many of the games of the Tressel era were not rewatchable. Excluding the Michigan games, please pick the games you would watch again. I went through and just picked one game from each year that I thought was probably the most rewatchable game from each of those years. And some of those years it was pretty easy to tell, and some of the years it was like, there's nothing that I've felt compelled to sit down and rewatch. But 2001, I went with Northwestern. That was the Ohio State had gotten off to a very slow start. Northwestern was ranked number 14. They came into Ohio State. It was a night game, and the first home game after 9/11, and Ohio State just smoked them. That was a big. I don't know if you were there that night. That was a very emotional night there. It was a very big game atmosphere, but just kind of a weird thing after 9/11. But it was a very memorable game from that perspective.
By the way, Tom, Northwestern finished 4-7 that year.
Yes, but at the time they were ranked number 14. It seemed like a big deal at the time, and that's the important thing. 2002. This was a game against a team that did not finish 4-7. The Miami Hurricanes. I'm going to say the national championship game was pretty darn rewatchable. Mm-hmm. It's been on ESPN Classic for the last 16 and a half years, so that's probably a pretty good sign. 2003, North Carolina State, the 44-38 triple overtime game. And this was a good enough game that we ended up just talking about this kind of out of nowhere sometime earlier this year. That is one of the hottest and also most exciting games I've ever seen at Ohio Stadium. 2004, the Michigan State game. Yeah. Ted Ginn scored touchdowns 3 different ways. He took a reverse, he had a punt return, and then right at the end of the game, he had he ran just like a post and just split the safeties and was gone, and had probably like a 60-yard touchdown with about a minute left. And everybody remembers the John L. Smith halftime meltdown the following year after the blocked field goal in Columbus. This is a completely lost classic. And we are doing those Buckeye rewinds. Like, this would be a good one to find. I can't remember exactly. I was covering the Michigan State postgame press conference, and it was just in this like trailer outside the stadium. And he came in and didn't really like the first question. And I think he just basically said like next question or something like that. And then someone asked him another question, and he got real mad and talked for about one sentence and then left. And it was like 36 seconds of post-game interview, and it was pretty spectacular. And it was I had it on a tape recorder at some point, but it's somewhere buried in the Ozone archives. That would be one worth digging up at some point in the future. 2005, you could go with either the Notre Dame Fiesta Bowl or Texas. I mean, the Texas game, I know Ohio State lost, so many Ohio State fans would not want to watch that game. That was one heck of a football game. Were you there for that game?
No.
That was one of the more exciting, loudest, memorable scenes that I can remember at Ohio State. I mean, that was such a great Texas team. That was such a great Ohio State team. The Ohio State team was not what it was by the end of the year, but That was quite a game. 2006, the game at Texas, that was in a 1 versus 2 at Texas, and I don't know that it was ended up 24-7, and it was Texas was very clearly overrated. Like Vince Young was going, Colt McCoy was the quarterback, and it just was like, no, that's not really that's not really the number 2 team in the country. 2007, this was an easy one. Anthony Murley getting off the school bus, screaming, "Let's go," and then just getting absolutely firebombed by Todd Beckman.
It was so bizarre.
It was so good. It's one of my favorite Ohio State Penn State memories. Anthony Murley getting off that stupid blue school bus and screaming. 2008, I forgot about this one. This was like this lost classic. Ohio State goes up to Wisconsin and is trailing real late, and then Terrell Pryor runs in like an 11-yard touchdown with a minute eight left, and wins 20-17. That was a pretty good one. 2009, Ohio State clinches the Rose Bowl with a 27-24 overtime win against Iowa, number 10 Iowa. And 2010, the Sugar Bowl against Arkansas. 2010 was just kind of, I went through, it was like, yeah, that wasn't a great year. Like, there wasn't a great game in 2010, but that Sugar Bowl was, for the last game of the Tressel era, which no one knew at the time, that was a very Jim Tressel way to go out. They were up 31-13 with 4 minutes left in the third quarter, and ended up giving up a touchdown. And then Arkansas put up a 5 spot in the fourth quarter. They had a safety and kicked a field goal, and it ended up 31-26. It was, Ohio State's up 31-13, very comfortably ahead, and then all of a sudden it got real nerve-wracking towards the end. It was a little reminiscent of this year's Rose Bowl. But that would be my run-through of the most rewatchable Tressel games from the...
What about the Fickle games? What's the most rewatchable for you, Tom, of the Fickle season?
Oh, for sure, it's got to be the Wisconsin game, right? I mean, unless you really want to watch the unless you really want to watch the 17-7 Illinois game, and that's. I'm not sure I want to get into your headspace if that's the one you want to rewatch. But.
I'm glad you did mention the 2009 Iowa game, because that was, just. Everything about that, it to have Iowa in it is kind of bizarre, but to that they were 11-2 that year. This is a week after Ohio State beat Penn State, who was also highly ranked, and anytime you can secure something for the Big Ten championship, that's always fun on a single play. I go back to like games that I kept on the DVR forever. And I don't even remember having a DVR in 2004, but I do remember like having the Michigan State, like just wearing out those Ted Ginn plays and rewinding and fast forwarding to those 3 touchdowns. And also his Indiana touchdown, his first career touchdown catch. And I know we're not supposed to talk about Michigan, but his punt return there. That Oklahoma State game, the end around, not even an end around, but the quick hitch out to Ted Ginn where he ran all the way around. That was another play, another one of those on the DVR where I kept it as long as I could. You already talked about the Texas 2005 Texas game. That's one of those games like the 2003 North Carolina State game where you just gained so much respect for a particular player, and that was Vince Young, because they beat him up. They chased him around all game long, and he had enough in him and pulled that one out. So yeah, when we talk about, or I say there's not a lot of rewatchable Jim Tressel games. There have been some, but 2010, I'm just looking, and the only decent team they played that season was Wisconsin, and that's the game they lost. And Ohio at 8-5 was the best record of their opponents, and Iowa 8-5. Everybody else is like 7 wins, 2 wins, 4 wins. Just a really crappy schedule, and that includes the Hurricanes that season as well. So my apologies, Chip. There are 6 or 7 rewatchable games from those 100.
There were a few that weren't terrible. Next one from @Aeronaut005. If the USC game goes better in 2008 and Beckman started at quarterback all year, would Tressel have tried Pryor at wide receiver? What do you think?
you wonder what would have happened if, things just go okay and Beckman stays in there. Because I do think that was the impetus for getting Terrell Pryor out there. It was either the next week against Troy, or I don't know if there was the bye week and then it was Troy. But that was the game that ended Todd Beckman's career. And I wonder if he would have been better and they wouldn't have just been shell-shocked and destroyed in that game. Would it have created an issue with Pryor? Would he have created an issue in not playing? But I don't think that this wasn't just a USC game, USC thing, Tom, because Todd Beckman was exposed in that game, and I believe he would have been exposed later on as well. And he was a second-year starter, starting for his second year. He was a fifth-year senior, sixth-year guy at that point because he gray-shirted. But he would still make some just poor decisions, falling down to the ground, and I'm just going to throw it up. And so I think what USC did was speed up the inevitable.
Yeah, I think that at some point that year, once it became clear they weren't going to win the national championship, they probably make that switch. And even if they were kind of going okay, they probably start bringing him along at that point, because I'm sure they wanted to keep Pryor happy, and his athletic ability made it such that he belonged on the field somewhere. They did run him at wide receiver in that Fiesta Bowl against Texas. Didn't he get a touchdown pass in that Fiesta Bowl?
Yes, he did. Todd Beckman started that game, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, and so it's possible that they stick him out there in goal line situations. I mean, I think you're right that Beckman, if that game, instead of being 35-3, if that game is 35-24, and it's like that's not a completely disqualifying loss, you probably keep Beckman on the field a little longer, and they probably are finding a way to get Pryor in there and use him situationally like they did against USC, and maybe they do try and put him in as a kind of goal line wide receiver and just, heave a fade to him once a game and see what happens, because they were, I'm sure, looking for a way to get him involved as much as they could, because he was such a unique athlete at that point that you couldn't keep him off the field, and so find a way to do something with him.
I guess you do the Tebow leak thing, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, and that's basically, my memory is that's basically what they tried to do to some degree in that USC game, where they would bring Pryor in, and I remember him having like a 15 or 20 yard run at one point, and that seemed like an absolutely earth-shattering event with how the rest of the Ohio State offense was going that day. So
it was.
Next one from @Stewart_E4USVet. If a college team was to take some substances that may or may not have been able to enhance their performance, how do you go about keeping the media, NCAA, and ESPN out of your hair? Asking for a friend who we'll just call Jabbo Weenie.
I think the best way to keep ESPN out of your hair is for your conference to sign a deal with ESPN as co-partners in a network that showcases your conference. Because as, say you're the keystone of that conference, you are the light bearer of that conference. No, ESPN's not going to want to shed darkness on this light bearer, because now they would be digging into their own pockets, and that's not what they want. In theory, this is a hypothetical. I think that would be, one way to make sure that any improprieties did not go far. Tom, we don't need to get too far into this, but whenever we see stuff like, the PEDs at Clemson, or a dude like embezzling money from a church to pay an LSU player, and I don't consider that. I think that is different than recruiting. I think that's just some criminal activity going on, allegedly. But it's in the news for 7 minutes. And I always wonder, if this is Ohio State, because I remember you would hear stories a few years back, like ESPN producers are coming to town and they will be in town for a month working on something, digging, asking people if they know anything, calling people, going door to door. And if if there was PEDs at Ohio State, or if there was the LSU situation, basketball or football at Ohio State, the hotels would be booked solid with media.
Sir, if you are suggesting that a network's business dealings have anything to do with their curiosity or lack of curiosity in the investigative and elements of looking into schools from a certain conference, sir, how dare you? It does seem a little curious what people get real interested in looking at and don't get real interested in looking at. It's I'm sure that there are places that probably would have gotten a little closer examination than Clemson has gotten, given there's a lot of acceptance of, well, I mean, he says it's not systemic, so I guess it's fine. Like, okay, no.
But there's also basketball stuff going on there too.
Yeah, well, yes, but so it's not the football program. See, so there's nothing to see here. So it's fine. It's you don't want to get too conspiratorial, but if you were starting a network whose top product was a certain football program, and that network was set to launch that fall, and your business model depended on creating demand from consumers in that area to directly fund that network, you would seem to be incentivized to not damage that product yourselves. So, that there's probably a line that could be drawn there if you chose to.
Yes.
The other thing is that, yes, technically, the LSU guy, as is accused, if he did steal money from a church and give it to a recruit, really he's just kind of closing the loop from the Cam Newton thing, where a booster gave money to fix a church. So really churches have kind of netted out to zero in the South. So I think that's I think that's a time served thing at the most.
The offering to be named later.
Next one from @Brutus1207. Ohio State, Penn State 2016 was actually a bad thing for Penn State because it made them think Franklin was a good coach. Discuss.
I don't think it's ever a bad thing to win. It creates expectations that you then force that coaching staff to meet. What I don't think Franklin needs to be doing is talking about who is elite and who isn't and why they aren't elite. But then it's also he's justifying why Penn State doesn't win this game or doesn't win this game, and saying it's okay because we're not supposed to, we're not elite, and we don't necessarily need to strive to be that because we're Penn State. But this is no different than when he gets that big win against Ohio State. It gives them a win against a ranked team. I think when he was at Vandy, they had one win against a ranked team his entire career, and that was against Georgia when Aaron, what's his name? Their quarterback.
Aaron
Murray was injured. He was either out or got injured during that game, and that was like their lone win against a ranked team. And they haven't done that much better at Penn State, and they should be doing considerably better. But Tommy's the best coach in the Big Ten, right?
He is one of the coaches in the Big Ten, and that's a thing. He's someone where I feel like you've kind of seen what he is. Like, He will get them to a certain level. He's a very good recruiter and will get the talent to a certain point. And then he's also not a great game coach, and that will also keep the talent from getting much beyond that point. I think that whether or not he won that 2016 Ohio State game, 2017 they went 11-2 and won the Fiesta Bowl. So I think he would have bought himself a good amount of leeway with that 2017 season as it is. And, even if you take that 2016 Ohio State game away from them, he went 7-7, 10-11-9 wins. So even if you take away that 2016 win, they're still jumping from 7 wins to 10 wins and then 11 wins the next year. So I think that they would have still been pretty bought in at that point, but I would have to see something pretty substantial out of them this year to change my opinion of him, and the trend lines there aren't great. The recruiting's fine, but they've had a ton of decommits, and we have a question about that later that we may or may not want to get into, but they seem like they may have kind of bumped up against their ceiling, at least their ceiling with him there. And and that's a perfectly respectable level to be at. That is, they are very much in the same boat as Michigan in a lot of ways. Like they are good, but they're very clearly a notch below the top of the pecking order in the Big Ten East. And you can be a very good team and not be as good as Ohio State, and that's kind of where they are right now. And until you see them consistently get above that level, then it seems like it would almost be a fluke for them to do it.
Shouldn't they first get to Michigan State's level and make the playoffs?
That would be helpful if they did that. Although they have not gotten to Michigan State's level and won 3 games either, so they've been kind of comfortably in the middle there. Next one from @Brutus1207. If Urban goes to USC, will that soften the sting of him losing his spot as the head breakfast coach at Bob Evans? And first of all, I would just like to say, I think the head breakfast coach joke just got just vanished way too soon. That is still, I think there's a lot of great material there that has just, it was given the timing of it and the circumstances around it. I think people didn't want to joke about it much then. I think it's time for a renaissance of head breakfast coach jokes. What do you think?
Because we didn't get a chance, like you said, and so many missed opportunities. I like to question coaches' decisions, and what does Urban do for breakfast? What is he an eggs over easy guy? I want to second guess him as a breakfast coach, just like we do as a football coach. Does he always rely on does he want runny eggs? Like he wants a runny quarterback. Does he want his eggs runny? But if he goes to USC, what do they do for breakfast out there? Like In-N-Out or guacamole? I don't know.
Avocado toast. Yeah, avocado toast for sure.
Yeah, that's not. You can't root for a coach like that. So if that's what he does, you know what? Good riddance to you. We don't need you around here. We don't want you around here. If you're going to be a coach and you're going to preach toast, it's got to have butter, or it's got to have butter and jelly, or it's got to have jelly, or it's got to have peanut butter. And I will go to my grave touting toast and peanut butter, and as a delicious treat, delicious breakfast. Sometimes when there's no food in the kitchen, it can be a lunch as well. So keep that in mind if you want to take the time to toast the bread. If not, you just go with a peanut butter sandwich and complain to people online about you didn't have any food, so now you're eating a peanut butter sandwich.
All right, last one from @Zadiah. If OSU doesn't get Bijan Robinson, is it time to start panicking about running back recruiting? Also, what's going on at Penn State? I'll let you handle the second part.
Damn it!
I'll handle the first one. I think there's a long distance between if they don't get Bijan Robinson, and right now the general trend seems to be that he's trending towards them. If they don't get him, I think there's a lot of real estate between Ohio State didn't get a 5-star running back this cycle and the time to smash each other's heads open and feast on the goo inside kind of panic moment. They just added 2 very good running backs in the 2018 class with Steele Chambers and Marcus Crowley, both of whom are big enough to be kind of every down backs, both of whom have the recruiting pedigree that suggests that they should be pretty good running backs. And even if they didn't get a running back this cycle, it would not be the end of the world. They have some decent depth there. But from all indications, they are trending pretty well with Bijan Robinson. They're trending pretty well with Knighton, the running back who's kind of the all-purpose back type player out of Florida. So I would not go out looking for reasons to panic just yet. I don't think that there's reason to be all that concerned right now. And even if that stuff does, even if they somehow do miss on both of them, I still don't think that's really cause for total panic at that point.
And then to answer what's going on at Penn State. They've had tons of decommitments, tons, I think, for, as the great philosopher Terrell Pryor once said about Penn State, it's just too country. And so that's, I think that speaks for itself, and that gives you reason why maybe things aren't going so well. But that does it for today's show. Tom, next week's show, just so you guys know, will be a tail of the tape, Ohio State, position by position, and Michigan. It'll be a vacation show, so we're going to get on that here shortly as we let you in behind the curtain. That's why this show is a little shorter, so that we can get this done. And Tom, any previews of the Michigan show? Center, who's got the better center?
Michigan has a little more veteran experience at center, but you have to think that Ohio State has probably, in terms of quality of play, by the end of the year, I think Ohio State at center is going to be every bit the equal of Michigan, if not potentially a little ahead. Indeed.
So you're going to get insights like that, although it won't have to, it won't be a super long show, but it'll be a show. So you've got that to look forward to. We want to thank you all for continuing the ratings and reviews. I have something I have to send out. I'll eventually get it out. So please bear with me. And you know what? Thank you all for listening. Please continue to listen. And Tom, you got anything else?
I do not. I guess you'll have to wait till next week to find out what else I've got.
Oh, there you go. What a tease. All right. Thanks, guys.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say you will, now say you will. Oh yeah. Say you will, now say you will. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave tonight.